Alright guys, welcome back to another Blender tutorial. It's Mason here, and today we're going to be focusing on nature, and more specifically grass. And so today I'm going to be teaching you how to make realistic grass in cycles. So there's tutorials out there for grass on internal, and there are some for cycles, but there aren't that many good free tutorials for grass. And so I was thinking, well, I know how to make grass, so I might as well throw together a tutorial for you guys now that I'm getting back into tutorials. I just got the new microphone in today, about an hour ago, and so I jumped right onto this tutorial. So make sure to like the video if the audio is sounding better, because I'm not sure how it comes out on you guys' end. Alright, so I'm just gonna this is the render that we're gonna be working on today. This is just a quick little environment, just 400 samples, 1080p. And so we're going to be going through creating, first of all, these guys. So these are the main, the main grass particles that you'll see. We're using entirely particles, no modeling for the grass itself. The second thing that we're going to go over is these guys. These guys are the longer ones. They're kind of the ones that haven't been cut for a while and they're still randomly sticking up everywhere. And then we're going to be making the clovers, which you can see one down there. The clovers are optional because the clovers aren't very visible then as compared to the rest of the things in the scene. So you can choose to use them or not. If your computer's not too heavy duty, I would suggest not using them because they're just kind of a ram hog if you can't even see them. Then we're going to be moving on to making these little guys. So these guys are called buttercups, and they're just a type of flower that grows in grass here and there. Also, in the end, I'll be showing you how to make one of these little guys here, a dandelion. It's like a dandelion seed pod, and that's just as a bonus to give like a focal element to your scene. Alright, so I'm just going to show you the scene, this scene specifically. So this is the grass plane itself, and I know it's laggy right now. That's just because it's displaying those clovers, because the clovers are actually kind of high res. Not high res, but there's so many of them. So yeah, I'll just go one by one and I'll show you each particle system here. So this one is just the main grass. I'm only displaying 10% of the grass right now because there's actually 2 million. In the end, I have 2 million grass particles in this scene. So yeah, that's the first layer of grass. The second layer is the longer one, so these guys. And so there's definitely not as many of these. Then we have the clovers, which here you go. And then we also have the buttercups, which are just these little guys here and there. And then finally, here's the models for the clovers. So they're very low poly, as you can see. Then I believe this is the models. This is the model. There's only one for the buttercup. And let's find. Here we go. Here are some of the little seed pod things for our little guy there. And this here is the seed pod itself. So this guy's actually got a particle system on it as well. And it's just duplicating all of these guys on it. That way we don't have to worry about creating a bunch or duplicating them and rotating them. Alright, so without any further ado, let's get right on into the tutorial itself. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up a new scene in Blender. I've got one right here, all loaded up and ready to go. And we're just going to start by deleting the default cube. And I'm just going to delete the default lamp too because we're also not going to need that. Alright, so now I'm going to add in a plane, and the plane is just going to be the main ground that our grass is going to be on. I'm going to scale it up by hitting S and then hitting 8 on my number pad. That'll scale it up by 8 units, or 8 times its original size. And what that's going to do is it's going to fill in our ground plane that we have already. So, now that we've got that, right now it's just 4 vertices, as you can see up here, 4. We want there to be much more geometry to play with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select everything with A, just hit W and subdivide it. And I'm going to do that just up to about there. That'll be fine there. And now we're going to add in some modifiers to start, because right now it's just kind of a flat plane, and dirt is obviously never flat, perfectly flat, so we're going to have some distortion. So the first thing we want to do is add in a displacement, and this displacement I'm just going to call bump. Doesn't matter. So now we want to go over to our textures panel, and right now you can see by default it changes it to image or movie, and we're actually going to change it to be clouds. Now I've got the original render open over here on my side panel, and the original, or the size that we're going to use is 0.85 down here. So just type that in, 0.85, and you can see it's overall a very large pattern, but that's fine. And the strength is just going to be 0.1. So you can see it doesn't make a huge difference, but it does just make the ground a little bit uneven, which is exactly what we want. Now I'm just going to select smooth shading, so we're not looking at that the ugly squares in here. And now what we're going to do is we want a little bit more geometry to it, but we don't actually want to add it into here. So what I'm going to do is add in now a subdivision surface, and the subdivision surface is going to be set to 3, and it's going to be above the one that we just placed, or yeah, above or below, however you want to look at it. Just make sure it's right here. Now that we've got that, you can see our edges have been rounded off. Now it's up to you if you want to do this, but I would suggest selecting the edges like this, holding Shift Alt and just clicking in between, and hold Shift E, or just tap Shift E and drag out your mouse until these edges are completely pink. And now you can see that sharpen them. Alright, so now the next thing, while we have these edges selected, I'm just going to drag it down just like that, just a little bit, so that it's not so perfectly flat. Otherwise you'll see the end of the plane. Okay, there you go. Now we're looking good. So we have another displacement coming up right here. So just add in a displacement, give it a new texture, and this one's going to be bump _1. And on this one, we're going to be using clouds texture again. So right now you can see we still have the last bump that we had selected. So don't use this to select a new one, otherwise that'll actually change what the first one we added was using. So select the next one by clicking this and selecting bump _1. Now we can change the size without worrying about it, and set the size to 0.45. That'll make it a little bit smaller, which is exactly what we want. The strength of this modifier is 0.05, so it's making a subtle difference, but it is there. See that? Okay, perfect. Now we actually have another subsurf to add, so add in another subsurface, and this one's just going to be set to 1. Okay, so after that subsurf, we should have a displace, a subsurf, a displace, a subsurf, and now it's time for one more displace. So give it a new texture, name it bump _3, and we're going to go over to our textures panel and select bump _3, and the one that we're going to use here is very fine. It's not a large texture at all, so just type this 0.02. Alright, now you see we got these giant spikes, so we have to make sure that we turn down the strength of that specific modifier, and the strength is actually just going to be 0.001. Alright, so you can see now we have these little dimples all over our plane. Alright, so we're actually done with the plane's geometry now, and what I'm going to do is, I want to save the scene, and you can just save it whatever you want. I'm just going to name it grass _tutorial_cycles. I can't really see what I'm typing because of my mic is in the way. There we go. And now we're actually ready to finally get into the grass itself. Now, if we were to add in a grass or a particle system right now, and let's just name this particle system while we're at it, call it grass _short, because this is the general short one. So I'm going to also name this Now, right now, I'm going to change the type to be hair. And you can see when we change the height of this hair, because right now it's really long, so I'm actually going to check advanced, and then right here we can change the height to 0.03, which is exactly the length that we want. Right now it's a little bit hard to see our hair because the ground plane is the same color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add two materials, and these are going to become our materials later on. But I'm just going to start by naming this one ground, and that's the one that the plane is going to be using. And just make it dark, just like that. It doesn't matter. Don't make it too dark because we still want to be able to see some of the details in it. And then add in another one here and call it grass. Blender seems to be doing this weird thing now where it's not reading the first letter I type in for some reason. Grass. And we're just going to leave the default viewport color. So now back in our particle system, if we scroll down to render and we change it to grass, now we can actually see these little hairs much easier. Alright, awesome. So we're all set. Next thing we want to do in our particle settings is check random. If you don't check random, it'll place these hair particles according to the vertices in our scene, and we don't want that because it'll look like there's rows, and rows is very fake when you're working with nature because nature is always random. So just make sure you check that little random option right there. Now next thing is the next random value, which is this guy. If I drag that up, you can see all the grass goes crazy. So we don't want too much of it, but we do want a little bit. So 0.001 is the value that we want to use in this case. Awesome. Now we can just skip over rotation here. We don't need that. So next panel is physics, and so the only setting we're going to change in physics is the Brownian. Now if I set this to 1, you can see it's kind of doing the same thing as the random was. If I set this to 0.1, you can kind of see what it's doing. It's bending our grass strand, so it's not so perfect. So I'm actually just going to set this to 0.03, just like that. You can see it gives our grass a little bit of a bend. Awesome. So scrolling down to render now, I can collapse that panel. We're going to check B-spline. I'm not entirely sure what B-spline does, but if you look closer, it kind of just smooths out the particles a little bit as I check that on and off. Cool, so I can actually collapse that one now as well. And if we scroll down to the most important panel here, it's children. Now children right now, as you can see, we have very little grass. What we want is for each one strand of grass we have, so let's focus on this guy here, we want there to be a bunch of grass particles coming out from the base, just like that. So to do that, we check simple on our grass, on our children, sorry. And now we can actually go through and edit the settings for this. So the first setting that we want to focus on is, oops, I'm moving the plane by accident. First setting we want to focus on is the radius. Now if I set the radius to 0, you'll see it kind of goes back to normal. However, if I set the radius to 0.02, let's say, you can see these are very densely packed. So each children, which we are displaying 10 per parent, and the parent is just the default value of hair, for each parent there's going to be 10 children being displayed. So right now we see 10 here, and they're very densely packed. I'm going to set the radius to 0.05, and then I'll just spread them out a little bit there. And now the next thing we want to do is clumping. So clumping, that's the render display. Clumping is moving these the base of the particles either in or out. So if I set this to 1, you can see it's kind of like we've got some clumping, and hairs are clumping at the tips. If we set it to 0, the hairs are clumping at the base. Now we want it to be favoring the base a little bit more, so I'm going to set this to negative 0.742. Let's just set it like that. And now you can see what that does. Now the shape changes the shape in which it clumps. So if I set this to negative 1, you can see we've got some weird tips at the top like that. They're just splitting out at the tip. And if we set this to 1, you can see it's only taking effect for a little bit of the base. So we want to set this to 0.7 is a good value to use. Okay, cool. Now we have only 2 more settings to go over with our children, or 2 more of the appearance settings, I guess. And that's length and threshold. Now, if I set length down to 0, you'll see our particles completely disappear. And so if I set this to 0.1, our particles are very short. Now, the reason I'm doing this is because I'm actually going to set the length to 0.2, is because for each clump of grass, there's always a bunch of little ones and then a couple tall guys coming out. And so how do we get those tall guys? Well, we can change the threshold. And so if I set this to 0.3, now you can see there's basically 80% of our clump is short, and the rest are these big guys coming out of it. And so now that's kind of how we want things to look. Okay, so the last thing that we want to change for these children is change the display size, or display amount, to 20, and the render amount to 20 as well. And that's all we really want to use. And now you can see we have grass all over our plane. Now, before we continue with any of the other particle settings, we want to start setting up our lighting and our camera. So I suggest if you want to light something, you go to the website. If you go in Google, let's just search free HDR. That'll come up with a website, SIBL Archive. And on this site, they have a bunch of free HDRs that you can light your scene with, and these are great to use. The one that we're going to be using today is Desert Highway. So if you click on that, it's 12.6 megabytes. It'll download a zip. And as you can see by this little 2, I've downloaded it multiple times because I've done this tutorial before. What you want to do is, once that's downloaded, you just want to open up where it is and just going to extract it. So I've already extracted it. This is what comes inside of your HDR file. And then what we're going to do now is we're just going to go back into Blender, and let's say I'm just going to save it here. And we're going to go over to the world node. And I'm going to click Use Nodes, and what that's going to allow us to do is use nodes with the world itself. So that gives us these options here. So if I click on this little dot beside the color and select Environment, we can actually open up the file in which we downloaded and extracted that thing into, and it's going to be under Desert Highway. And the one we want to use is Road to Mountain Valley ref, which I guess stands for reference, .hdr. And we're going to open that guy up. And sometimes Blender can crash when opening up a high resolution image like this. Yeah, there you go. You can see my desktop. Now, once it's back, we can check rendered, and it'll start rendering our HDR that we just got here. Sweet. Okay, so I'm going to go in the front view now. I'm just going to set up our camera because we want it to look better than just where it is right now. It's just staring at it like that. So if I'm going to set it kind of looking over here. Let's move it like that. And I'm going to move it close down to the ground. I'm going to kind of rotate it on the local x-axis. Now, here's a little tip for you. If you ever want to rotate something on the x-axis, the locals, so let's say I wanted to move this camera like this way, not that way. So let's say I want to move it like that. Well, that's what's called the local x-axis on this. Even though the x-axis in global is that way, if we hit G, which goes into moving, and double tap X, now you can see we're actually rotating along the locals. So if I rotate on the XX, now I'm rotating on the local X of our guy here. Okay, so I'm liking where it's positioned right now, but if I go into rendered, we have a problem here, and the main problem is we can see our ground. So how do we make it so that we can't see the ground? Well, we're going to split our view, and you can do that by just dragging on these cross hatches. And I'm going to change this to Node Editor, the new one. And now, in our Node Editor, we have this little world option. And because we checked to use nodes in our world, now we can edit our world with the nodes. So don't worry if you're not familiar with nodes. We're not getting too complicated in this tutorial. But all we're going to do for this node editor here is add in a texture coordinates by hitting Shift A and then input like that. And you're also going to hit Shift A and add in a vector mapping. And if we drag generated into the mapping here and mapping into the environment, we can actually adjust the rotation. So let's say I set the rotation to 0.5 on the X and then set the Y rotation to 0.4. Now you can see all we see is the sky, and that's exactly what we want. We don't want to see that ugly desert, because we don't want desert in our scene. Okay, so that takes care of the basic HDR lighting, and you can see all the HDR is doing is giving the shadows like a blue color. That's exactly what we want. We don't want it to actually give like shadows. It is doing that a little bit here, but that's okay. But you'll notice instantly when you use an HDR is you get these fireflies. So if I just zoom right in here, you can see it's placing these little white dots everywhere, and it's horrendous because that'll ruin your scene. No matter how many samples you use to render, it will always render these little white dots, and you'll get them a lot, especially if you have reflective surfaces, which we will have a lot of. So how do you get rid of these? Well, in the world settings, under settings here, there's multiple importance, and if we check that, you can see we get rid of all those dots. So if let's zoom right in, you can see that's with it checked, and that's with it without checked. You can see without it being checked, we have lots of those little dots. Alright, now you can just change the map resolution to 2048, and that's what I'm going to use. Awesome. So now if we take a look at this, everything is looking fine and dandy, other than our grass. You can see it's kind of like these big spikes. We're going to fix that in a second here. Okay, so there we go. That's the basic lighting. Now we're just going to add in a sun lamp. So I'm just going to go into rendered mode here, and the sun's coming from over there. So if I click there, I can add in a lamp sun, and because that's where the light's coming from, I want to rotate on the X like so, and then let's just rotate on the Z a little bit like that. Now they're going to change the settings for our sun. So in the lamp panel here, we're going to change the strength to be 7, and the size, I'm going to first, before I change the size, I'm going to enable metric on our scene data panel, or scene data, is that what it is? Yeah, whatever, the scene panel. And if we go over to our sun now, you can see it's in centimeters. You can also choose imperial if you use imperial. I use metric, so we have centimeters here. We're going to use 10 centimeters, that's the default. But we are going to change the color of our light here. I'm just going to change it to be kind of a warm one. And if we click rendered, you'll see now we have those shadows. Awesome. So everything looks a little bit yellow, but that's okay, because that's what it would look like if everything was white. So let's focus on this guy right here. I can hit Shift B to isolate a section of my render, and I can just use this box selection. So I'm going to focus on this guy here, and right now you can see that our particles are way too big. So if I select our ground plane again here and go into our particle section, we want to now edit the hair cycles rendering options. So under cycles hair, first thing we want to do is, if you look at grass, they never have these splits in them. So this is just to make render times faster, but we don't want to worry about that right now, because we're going to have a close-up shot. So if you have these splits, it's really gross. So we're just going to change it to curve segments, and instantly you can see we get rid of those. There are still some. You can see little tiny ones, but it's not as obvious. Now, if you ever look at grass isn't thick like this. It's not like a tube. It's actually flat. So if we change it from thick to ribbons, now you can see we're getting that. Last thing is obviously the shape of it. It's super wide. And so what we want to do is we're going to change the root thickness and the tip thickness and the shape. So root. So the base of our grass, we want this to be a lot smaller than it is right now. So we're actually going to set this to 0.04. So let that load, and there you go. Now you can see it's a lot thinner than it was. So now I'm going to set the tip to 0.01, just because I don't want it to be a perfect like point, or at least I don't want it to. It is still a point because we have closed tip. If I uncheck that, it will go a little bit thicker at the top, but we're still gonna have it fade out to a complete point, but it's not as fast, I guess you could say. And speaking of the gradient from thick to thin, we have our shape here. Now if I set this shape to 1, you can see it's very thin. It goes thick, and then like really fast fades off to thin. Now if we go with the -1, you can see it's thick, and then it grades off really close to the tip. Now I'm going to use -0.5, and you'll see that looks like grass. Just like that. That looks great. Awesome. So now we've taken care of the first order of business. The last thing we want to take a look at is the number of grass particles and where the grass particles are going to be placed. Now you might be wondering, well, we want the grass particles to be placed on the plane. That's true. But right now, if I select our camera here, here's a little trick. Under the camera panel, change the size up. Now the camera is being displayed super big. That doesn't change how the render affects. It's just in the viewport. Now right now, if we take a look at these lines, what these lines are meaning for us at this point is that we can only see what's inside of these lines. So all of this grass out here is not needed, and it's actually, when we're rendering, still calculating the grass that's behind our camera. So what we want to do is we want to fix that. The second problem is if we rendered it with like 1,000 or 1,000,000 grass particles, we'd run into an issue where close up to the camera, it looks really empty. You can see straight through, you can see the dirt. However, back here, it's dense. And, well, why is that? Well, the reason behind it is the farther away it is, the more dense it looks, simply because it's at a distance. There's really no way to explain it. That's how it works. If you look at real grass, it's like that as well. So we actually want it so that there's more grass up close than there is behind. And if we do that, then it'll actually look completely even throughout. And that is exactly what we want. So how do we achieve this? Well, we achieve this with vertex groups. So in our object data panel, which is this guy, it's the little triangle, you have a vertex group option. And so I'm going to add in a vertex group, and this one is just going to be called grass. And we're going to be using the same vertex group for all of the grass. So we don't need to name it short or tall, it doesn't matter. Awesome, so now we want to paint where the grass is going to be. So if we enter weight paint mode, you can see we have everything here. Now we have a little bit of a problem where if I change this to our brush type to add, and I try and draw, it's super laggy. And the reason it's laggy is because we have all the subdivision surface modifiers. Now those modifiers aren't actually even making a difference to how the paint affects the grass. So what I'm actually going to do is just disable all of our modifiers in the viewport. And that way now we can see we can draw a lot faster. So I'm just going to subtract what I just did there. Now, like I said, we want to have a gradient, so there's more in the front than there is in the back. To do that, we're going to select our add brush, and I'm going to change the strength to 1. And now if we scroll down to weight tools, we have weight gradient. And I'm just going to start the gradient at the very point of the camera and drag it out. And now you can see it's creating our weight gradient. So how the weight paint works is where the plane is completely red, grass will be placed. Where it's blue, or where it's completely dark blue, like I'll show you here, where it's completely dark blue, that's where there will be absolutely no grass, like that. So we want there still to be grass in the back, which we do. We have a light blue, which means there will be grass there. And these colors in between just indicate that there's those are like the in-between colors. So the green there's less, yellow there's more, and red there's most. Now we're going to select our subtract brush and we're going to change the strength to 1. And I'm just going to paint out everything else that we can see outside of these black lines. So just do that. You don't have to be too clean with it. Doesn't matter. As long as there's no grass out here, you'll be good. Just paint like this. And this is a great trick to make your grass render faster. Because if you have grass outside of the camera, it's going to eat up your render times. So there you go. Now we want to actually apply this, because right now you can see we've painted it, but it's not actually making an effect. So I'm actually first of all going to enable our modifiers again so we can see what's going on here. And now with our grass particles, under vertex group, change the density to grass, and boom, we only have grass now where our camera can see it. And that's exactly what we want. So now if I was to give this guy a render just as is, no materials, we will see one main issue. And the main issue is there's very little grass. We have some grass here and there, but overall we only see the ground plane. So we obviously have to fix this. So what is the grass amount that we're going to use for this first particle system? Well, in the emission panel up here, we are going to use 100,000, which means for every 100,000 particles, there's going to also be 20 children. So basically, 20 times 100,000 is 2 million. So we have 2 million grass particles in this scene. So if we were to do that right now and change this to 100,000, Blender will probably crash, because I can do it. I can show you. I'll save it first. If I type this into 100,000, it'll take a second to load, and Blender will stop responding, and yeah, there you go. So it's kind of risky business just to randomly type that in there. So we're just going to type this back to, we're going to leave it at the 100,000, but under display, set the display percentage to 5. So it's only displaying 5% of what we have, just like so. Now there's one more thing, and if we, I'll just type this back up to 100%. If we take a look at the back of our plane here, you'll see it's all very like even. It's not like too randomized. And the reason why is because we can actually randomize the height of our grass as well. So if you go over to the render tab, you can see there's a random number. We're actually going to change that random number to 0.9. And now you can see in the back it will be a little bit feathered out in the height. So that's exactly what we want. Now we're all set for the first particle settings. So if I now just go into rendered mode here, we can kind of see how things are looking. Let it render out. It's building the BVH. And it's taking a while. There we go. Okay. There you go. You can see the grass. Everything is looking much better than it was before. Awesome. So now, everything's white. So we want to change that, of course. So I'm just going to change my display amount once again on here down to 5. Down to 5%. Whoops, I didn't even type it in. There you go. Alright, we're going to set up our materials. So first material is the ground. And the ground is a very simple material. It's just diffuse, and it's dark brown. If you want, you can use an actual texture, but I've never found that useful, seeing as we don't want to see the ground anyways. Awesome. So now we also want to set up our grass material. So right now you can see our grass is just white, like so, and so we don't want that at all. So we have our ground material here, and everything is all fine and dandy, except our grass is white. How do we fix this? Node editor. Oops, not the text editor. node editor. And with this little guy here, let's select our grass. Awesome. So our grass right now is just a diffuse, and we're going to keep that, but we're going to add it in a shader mix shader. And I'm going to zoom in here so you guys can see. So now we have the diffuse going into the mix, going into the material, but we want a glossy as well because grass is very glossy. So by default now, glossy is set to GGX. I'm going to set it to Beckman because that's what I'm used to, and that's what I created the last scene in. And the roughness for our glossy here is 0.1. And the factor between the two is 0.1 as well. So I can just drag that in. And in our preview here, we get a glossy white thing here. So now I'm just going to drag this out, and if I hold Control and middle mouse button in our side panel, I can zoom in just like that, and now we can see that a lot bigger while we're working. Now of course right now it's just a ball, it doesn't look like grass, but if we select these strands, you can see it changes it to look like grass basically. Cool. Now we want to change the color because obviously it's just white right now. To do so, we could just change the color to be like a grass green, which doesn't look like that at all. But the problem with doing that is grass has, like when grass receives shadows, obviously the grass is darker at the bottom because it's being shaded by the other grass particles around it. However, Blender's calculations aren't that good. They can't render each shading on the base, and it won't look real. So to get that effect, we can add in a converter color ramp. And if we drag that into the color here, you'll see it's not actually dark at the base and light at the tips. It's just using the general 50% of each of these, which is just 50% in the grayscale here. So how do we get it to use this end as the base and this end as the tip? Well, to do such a thing, we add in an input hair info. And if we drag the intercept into the factor of our color ramp, you'll instantly see over here it's dark at the base and light at the tip. So now we want to color our grass. So we have this tip here and this base. Now the base is going to remain completely black. However, our tip is going to be kind of like a burned yellow color. So if we select our tip here, I can make it like a gross darkish. Now if you want it to be exact as the previous scene I showed you that I made, we can actually do that. I'll just show you. If I select the hex here, I can paste in the hex that I used in the last one. The RGB value is 0.515 in the red, 0.356 in the green, and 0.150 in the blue. And that's for the tip of the grass particle. Now the next one, we're going to add in a new one with this plus. We want to drag it right up. And this one's actually just going to be sorry, I just did something bad on the other side over here. This one's just going to be a bright green. And I'm going to paste in the new one here. And that's the kind of the color we're going for. You can manually select this if you want, but I want it to be perfect. So the red is 0.75, the green is 0.386, and the blue is 0.040. And the reason I'm giving you these exact values is because grass is kind of touchy, and I also want to make sure that this looks as good as the last one. And sometimes when I'm recording, the results don't look as good as they did before. Okay, so add in another one. This one's just going to be just about right under the pointer there, the little arrows for selecting RGB. And I'm going to paste in this new hex value. And if we take a look at that, the values for this is red 0.098, green 0.184, and blue 0.023. And there you go. That's the values that I used. One more, which is just going to be right underneath this arrow here. We're going to change the color of this one. This one's going to be more of a dark-ish green. And so if we select it, I'll paste in the hex value from my last scene, and the values are 0.034, 0.095, and 0.01. Now you can see that's the dark. And I can look over here, and this looks like grass now. The last one wasn't very shaded, it was just all one solid color, and it was also white. So the reason why we have this tip here, kind of a brown rather than a green, is because the tips of the grass are kind of burnt by the sun. So that's that. So there you go, that's the color. Now, what we want to do is add in a translucent shader, because grass is very translucent. It's not completely like solid. Light passes through it. So to do so, we add in a shader, add shader. Not a mix shader, an add shader. Make sure it's an add shader, because the math behind it is different. So add in a shader translucent and drag the translucent into the bottom there. So now we have the diffuse going to the glossy, to the mix, to the add, to the translucent. So now you can see it's kind of just gone completely white. And to fix that, you just drag the color from the color ramp into the translucent, and you can see it's looking a little bit better. So here's the difference between the two. So if I take a look at this one, you can see absolutely no light's going through. If I take a look at this one, there is a lot of light coming through. Now, when you use a translucent, it's a little bit too bright, like too much light is coming through. So to fix this, if we just add in a color gamma, you can see we have this color gamma here. Now, if I set this to 0, you might think that'll make it completely dark. You'd be wrong. That'd make it completely white. For some reason, with the gamma, 0 goes lighter and up goes darker. I don't know why it does that. It's a little bit confusing for me, but whatever. We're going to set it to 1.2. Will be a good value. And there you go. If I go back to the 3D view now, and we can just take a look at some of our grass strands here and just see how things are shaping up. Okay, cool. So now you can see we're dark at the base, and it goes up, and we get that little brown near to the tip. Now we have a bit of a problem here, and you've probably noticed it. We've applied that grass material to the plane as well. So to fix that, what we're going to do, and for some reason I don't know what it's done here, but it would seem it has changed the ground material as well. I'm not sure why. We only edited the grass, but it changed the ground. So if I just hit 2 on this grass material, let's just actually get rid of that, add a new one, and call this ground, and we can just change it to that dark brown. It did this to me every single time that I practiced this scene. I'm pretty sure it's just a bug in Blender. I don't know why it's doing it, but yeah, I'm not going to worry about it. So now that we've added this new one, it's actually changed the grass to use the new one here. So let's go under render again and select grass once more, and also select our plane in edit mode, select everything, and assign ground. So now we're back to our normal setup. So if I render this out, you'll see the ground is finally brown and the grass is green. Exactly what we want. Alright, so now that I've got the first particle system, we've got our materials, we've got our lighting, and we're all ready for the next step. But before we go into the next step, I'm actually just going to do a render out here. So it's going to be rendering at the full 2 million grass particles right now on the GTX 970 card. And so it shouldn't take too long, I shouldn't hope, probably 5 minutes, but I will time-lapse this section so you don't have to watch it render for 5 minutes. Alright, so there you go. Just finished rendering. Took about 4.5 minutes, so that's not too bad. But yeah, take a look at that. We've already got nice looking grass. So if you want, you can actually stop here, and this would look very nice on a scene. However, if you're doing a close-up of grass like we are in this video, you're going to want some more details. So the first part is we're going to add in the longer grass now. And don't worry, this isn't going to take 50 minutes like the last one took. It's going to be very fast. All we're going to do is add in the new system. We're just going to call this grass underscore long. And we're going to, with this selection box, select the grass short one. And we're going to hit this 2. And that's just going to duplicate it so that this grass long is using a duplicate of the previous one. I'm actually going to rename it to grass underscore long. Now, as you can see, when you duplicate it, it actually gets rid of the vertex group you're using. So you have to reapply the vertex group. And give it a second to load. There you go. Now, we're not going to have as many of the long ones at all. We're just going to be using 1000, which is the default usually. There we go. And really the only thing that we're going to change is the length. So under velocity, instead of 0.03, we're going to use 0.05. And you can see now we have a couple long ones sticking out here and there. It's very subtle, but it will pay off. Awesome. So now we're ready to get into the second, I guess, to last particle system. And that is the clovers. So if we take a look at our original render, the one that I did beforehand, I can show you that we've got little clovers underneath the surface there. And let's see if I can just find it. There we go. Just let it load. There you go. So this is kind of optional. You can see there's a clover down there, and it's kind of time consuming to make this clover, and so it's almost not necessary at all if you don't plan on really doing a close-up, and it's really not that necessary even for close-ups, but we're going to do them anyways. I'll model one, and I'll just show you how to do that. Okay, cool. So we're going to go into a new layer over here, and we're just going to model a simple clover. So if I show you over here, this is the last one that I did. A clover rarely actually has 4 leaves. It's hard to find a 4-leaf clover, but we're making 4-leaf clovers anyways. So you can see it's a super low poly. We've got like 8 vertices around the side here, and these guys are super low poly as well. So we're just going to do that here. So I'm going to add in a cylinder. First thing you want to do is hit T or F6 to open up your options for your new object, and we're going to change the vertices to 8. And there you go. We're also going to uncheck the cap fill, or not uncheck it, but change it to nothing. There you go. So first things first is go into edit mode and hit GZ1, and that'll snap it, or not snap it, but it'll move it up to the ground floor like so. And now I can scale this up on the Z, let's say 4 times. That looks just about right. Let's scale it actually up 2. Oops, yeah, scale Z2. There we go. Also, now it's too thick, so I want to scale on the Z, or scale only not on the Z. So if I hit Shift Z, that'll scale just in the X and Y. I can scale that down to, let's say, about there. Cool. So I'm just going to set smooth, and now it looks pretty darn good. We're just going to add in the petals now. So I'm going to add in a plane, move it on the X1, scale up by 2, actually scale up by 3, that's better, drag it up to the top here, and this will be our first clover. Okay, so add in 2 loops this way and 2 loops that way to start with, and these loops are going to be scaled down in, just like so. Scale that one in, and scale that one in. This one is going to come out kind of like that, and then we're going to add in one more in there and drag that in, just for that little tiny bit of detail. Cool. So now I'm just going to select this middle section here and just drag that up, and then select this guy and just drag that up a little bit. So that's our first petal. Very simple. Now I'm going to add it to the same mesh. So hit Control J, and now you can see it's all in one mesh. And I'm going to select just the one leaf here, and rotating around the 3D cursor, which should be at your center, change it to 3D cursor by hitting period or selecting it from this drop down. If we hit Shift D and rotate 90, it'll rotate like that. And now we can rotate it. Actually, I'm just going to use 3 because you usually only find 3 leaves on a clover. Cool. So there's our first clover. We're going to add in a little bit more detail like this, add in 3 loops. The reason why is now we can sort of, I'm going to change it back to median point. We can vary this a little bit, so it's not so straight and unnaturally perfect. Oops. So that looks fine. I'm also going to now select all the leaves and just rotate them a bit like that, and rotate them a bit like that. So now we have a unperfect but perfect clover. So we're going to add in a new material, and we're going to call this clover, just like so. And the clover is actually just going to be our grass, only if I hit this 2 and rename it clover here, there we go, we can change the way this works a little bit. So under node, we're going to get rid of the intercept, and that's just going to make it like kind of a generalization of all these settings, which is exactly what we want, other than I'm just going to remove this final tip one there. That's all we want to do. That's literally making the clover material. And I'm just going to give it kind of a darkish, there you go, green. Now, we could just use one clover, but I'm going to use 3 different size and shapes. So I'll just make these ones different. So just edit them by selecting these loops here, and just like we did with the last one, vary them. Select the whole head, rotate it, just so there's a little bit of variation in each clover. You don't want them to be repeating too much, otherwise the viewer, if they can see the clovers, it'll be very obvious that all the clovers are exactly the same. So I'm just going to select the last clover here and edit it up here. There we go. And we're golden. Awesome. So right now, these objects, we have all these objects created, but if we want all of them in one particle system, we have to put them in a group. So select all of them, hit Control G, you'll see they get outlined green now. Change the group name to clovers. Awesome. So that takes care of the clovers. Now we just have to apply a particle system to them. And for the clovers, we actually are going to make a new vertex group. And that's because we don't want there to be clovers all the way in the back where we won't even be able to see them. So we're just going to have them up front where you can see through to the ground. So to do so, add a new vertex group. Name this one, actually we're going to name it foliage, just because the other flowers and stuff are going to use the same vertex group as well. So as we did in the last one, let's disable the subsurface and displace so that it runs a little bit faster for us. Then we can change over to weight paint now. So everything's blue again. Now we're going to do the same thing we did last time. Just use the weight gradient. Only instead of dragging it to the end, we're going to drag it to about here. So it's only in front of the camera. And now we're also going to subtract outside of the camera, as we did on the last one. So it's still lagging a bit because we've got those particle systems enabled. Just remove everything outside of the camera, and you should be ready to go with the particle system. Cool beans, as they say. I'm going to just say or enable our displacement ones again, just like that. Now we can set up our clover. So I'm just going to disable our grass, and in our particles we're going to add a new one, call it clover and call this clover as well. Now, I'm just going to we're going to first of all change, of course, the hair to, or the type to hair, check advanced, and now we're going to take a look at our settings. So everything in here is going to remain exactly the same other than check random. And also grass long. Okay, just checking that grass long is checked random too. So check random's good, and then we can collapse emission. Next one that we're going to look at is the render panel, which is here. And we're going to change it to group. Oops, not, one check died. Group. And the reason we're going to change it to group is so now we can actually select our clovers group, which is the one that we use to create our clovers. And you can see right now the clovers are absolutely huge, and they're not rotated right. So if we enable the clovers tab as well, the clovers layer, we can see the clovers. And if I was to rotate these, you can see it's actually adjusting the rotation of the clovers. Now I want to rotate around the bottom of the clover, and because that's the origin point, we can just in object mode hit Shift S, cursor to selected, and now if we hit period on our number pad or on our keyboard, we can rotate around the 3D cursor. So if we rotate on the x-axis 90 negative, you can see our clovers are now orientated properly. So I'm just going to do that for the rest of them so that they're all rotated properly. That way all of our clovers are facing up. There you go. So now we still have the main problem of 1, they're too big, 2, they're on the entire plane, and 3, they're not random enough. So step 1, vertex group. Let's select foliage because that's the one that we just made. And next is adjusting the size. So under physics, under physics, the size is going to be 0.05, which it already is, so that's good. The velocity is what we're going to change now, and that'll change the size of our clovers as well. So set this to 0.05. Oops, didn't even calculate that for some reason. And boom, now they're a lot smaller. And actually, it doesn't look like they're small enough for some crazy reason. So let's go down to like 0.03. And actually, if we want to know how big they really should be, if we go back to our modifiers and enable our other particle system, we can adjust the size accordingly. Also, I believe we're going to go down to rendered as well and change that, rendered, right? Oh, right, I'm sorry, I want to select the wrong one. Okay. Yes, rendered, or let's see, size, yes. just looking at the other settings on the other scene that I made so I make sure everything's right. So the size for the clovers is 0.001, and then we can set the velocity to 0.05, and that bump that up to there, and everything's kind of absolutely tiny. Let's use 0.01. That looked better. Okay, random size now is 0.5. There we go. And I'm going to set this back up to, let's say, 0.05. That'll be too big. So 0.02. 0.02 looks just about right. That should just about take care of the clovers. I'm going to set the size to 0.001 and the normal to 0.45, and that's better. So now what we want to do is change the amount of clovers that we have in the scene. Are the clovers using the particle system that we, or the vertex group? It doesn't look like it is. It's coming all the way out here, even though we have foliage checked. In the emission we have random. Well, that's okay. Under emission, we're just going to change it to 7,000. So we have 7,000 clovers. Yep, that's good. We're fine. Cool. So if I go into rendered mode, actually I'm going to change back to median point for rotating. Rendered mode, you can see we've got all of our clovers, which are are small. They might not be too noticeable, but they're there, and at least we can say we did it. Cool. Now, let's disable viewing for the clovers. And we're ready to get into creating the buttercup. So the buttercup is that little yellow flower that's throughout our scene here. So we've got a couple here and there. So the clover or the buttercup is super simple to make. In 3D view, I'm going to go to a new layer, and we're going to add in another cylinder. So go to mesh, add in a cylinder, and we're going to change the vertices to 5 this time. So it's super low resolution. And I'm going to move up on the z-axis 0.1 or 1 like we did on the last one. Awesome. So I'm going to scale this up on the z-axis by 11. Let's go 20. Let's go 40 then. Scale Z 40. That looks better. We just don't want it to be too short. Otherwise, we won't be able to see the buttercups through the grass. Awesome. Scale 1.2. There we go. That's better. Now we're ready to start extruding out the leaves. If we take a look at the last clover we made, or I made, you can see that there's underlying leaves and then there's the petal. So we want to make these leaves there first. Oops, don't want to close it. Okay. What the heck? Now, to do this, all we want to do is go into top view, or yeah, sure, top view works. Select one of them, extrude on the Y, about there. And we don't have to extrude on the Y, you can just extrude, and just extrude them out, like so. They don't have to be perfect as long as they're out there. Then you're good. Okay, now you're going to add in one loop cut for each of them. And then I'll just do that. And now if we select all of them, we want these to be wider. Now if I scale them, you can see they're kind of scaling out like that. If I set our rotation point to individual origins, now we can see what that's doing. It's scaling per selection. So we can scale that up there. And let's actually even scale out the tips of the leaves to be about there. That looks way better. Scale that, or drag these guys up now, just like so. I'm going to disable or re-enable median point so that we're not rotating around individual origins anymore. And there you go. Now I think the base is a little bit, or at least the leaves, I guess you could say, are not big enough. So I'm going to actually scale up our leaves to be about there. Otherwise the flowers will be just weird and small. Awesome. So now to do our petals, we're going to duplicate the leaves and hit piece section. And now you can see we've got two objects, one that's the leaves and one that's the stem. So we're going to select just the petals, and I'm going to first of all add in hit Control 1 to add in a subsurf. And now what we're going to do is we're just going to select the top sections of our petals here, move them up just like so, and then select the very top, so just the edges here, and scale those in. That looks just fine. Now these guys are actually separate. You can see it like that, or they're not. But what we want to do is we just want to add in a face in the middle. That'll make it better there. Awesome. So I'm going to select everything on these petals, and I'm actually just going to hit Control N or Control Shift N. What that's going to do is it's going to flip the normals, so the top is bright and the bottom's dark. Cool. I'm also just going to hit Control Shift Alt C and origin to geometry, and then we can scale this up, and let's drag this up here so that's a little bit bigger. Now if we apply the subsurf, we're going to do that. There you go. Now you can see it looks like that, and we're going to add it back to the same mesh. So just holding Shift, selecting this one now, and then Control J. Now we're going to add in the materials. It's very simple. Just add in first one, which is clover. It's the same one that we already made. And then the second one, which is going to be pedal. I'm sure that's not how you spell it, but whatever. So in the node editor here, I'm just going to, in our edit mode, actually, select just the pedals, then select the pedal material and hit assign. That'll be good, and you can see what that does now. Now we're just going to edit the pedal material, and the pedal material is simple. It's just a mix shader between diffuse and glossy as always. Beckman 0.1, actually let's go 0.2 and 0.1 and connect those up. There you go. Now we're also going to change the diffuse to be kind of a yellowish creamy color, kind of like that. Not too overly saturated of a yellow like that, but yeah, just about there. Looks perfect. We're also going to add in a add shader, shader translucent. Drag that up into there. Now we want this translucent to be using the same color, so we could select white, or select this one, use the dropper tool and select that. That works. But there's this new trick I found out, and I never knew this before. If we actually click on the yellow, we can drag that color. If we click and drag, and we can just drop it in. So I can drop that color in wherever I want. Super cool. So yeah, just drag that into the translucent, and then we can darken it a little bit. And there you go. That's actually the pedal. And I'm just gonna color the pedal a little bit like that. So there you go. That is our buttercup. Other than, we're going to do the same thing we did with our last 3 models and add in some variation to the buttercup. So just drag this around like that. We're only going to make 1 buttercup. We made 3 clovers, but that is just because there's so many of them. There's not going to be too many buttercups, so you won't be able to see too much of a variation in them anyways. There we go. So now we're going to do the final particle system for the day on our plane. Select the plane here in the new layer. And actually I'm going to select our clover here, or not clover, our buttercup, and just name it butter. Cool. So with our plane now, we're going to throw together one more particle system for it, and this particle system is going to be butter. There we go, and butter. And of course it's going to be hair. Of course we're going to check advanced. We're going to use random, and we're going to use the foliage density vertex group. Awesome. So now, first order of business is selecting object in our render tab and selecting butter. And you'll see now we've got a bunch of our ginormous buttercups. So first things first is, just like the clovers, we have to rotate them. So I'm going to select our clover here, Shift S, cursor to selected, hit period on the keyboard to change to 3D cursor, rotating. Select everything in edit mode and rotate X 90 negative. And now it's perfect. So let's just go back to here, select our plane, and we're only going to be using 300 of the buttercups. Now if I go into a camera view, they're huge, and so I want to change first of all the size down to 0.001, which is as small as it can go. However, if we also change the velocity now, we'll be good. So let's use 0.4, see how that looks. That might be a little bit too much. Let's use 0.3. And if I take a look at that, let's use 0.35. This is just all about experimenting. 0.35 looks better. Cool. Cool beans. Now, let's scroll down. Let's find, physics, random size. The random size is going to be 0.4. So that'll make some of them a little bit smaller than the others. And now I'm going to just change this up to 0.36, because that made all of them a little bit shorter. Okay, cool. That looks good. Final thing for these guys is changing the rotation. So we're actually going to check rotation on here and change it to, sorry, not none, normal. So now they're basically the same as they were before. However, I'm going to change the random here to 0.4. Oh, that's too much. 0.1 here, and random here 0.1. There. Cool. So let's just go into rendered mode here so we can take a look at these buttercups. Now you can see we've got these buttercups, and actually I think I even want the buttercup material to be even more saturated than it is. It's right now a little bit dull. It's very dull. So let's just select the material for that, split it, open up the node editor, and let's change that diffuse color to be a little bit more of a buttercup or buttercuppy kind of thing. Drag that color over and make it just a bit darker for the translucent. Okay, let's see how that looks now. It was just looking a little bit too pale. You want to be careful not to go too saturated, but I think in that case it was just, yeah, that's way better. Cool. Let's now add in, let's change the seed for that material, or for those particles, because I want there to be more up in front of the camera. Let's just change this until we have a nice one that we can use. That's not good. That's nice. In rendered mode here, if we take a look at that, that looks very good. Cool. One last final thing we're going to do for the scene before we set up our depth of field and actually render it out is make that dandelion, this guy. So this guy's cool. He's the main focal element of the scene, and we're going to model him right now. So go and open up another layer, and I will once again show you a demonstration of what the dandelion looked like in my last scene. So let's take a look over here. This is the dandelion. So the dandelion, if I just disable the particle system here, it's a low poly ball, a low poly stem, and a low poly, like, little leaves. So these leaves hang down like that. And then we've modeled, oops, that's the wrong one. We've modeled these little guys, and it's also super low poly. If we take a look, we can probably look over here. Yeah, this one's bigger. Just a bunch of cylinders that are super low poly, and a little bead or a little seed at the bottom. Okay, so now we can model that on our new one. So just add in a cylinder. Let's change this to back up to 8 again. Move up on the z-axis and scale on the z-axis 20, and scale in on the x and y, hitting Shift Z, scaling it kind of like that. Cool. Now selecting this top, extruding it up, and selecting median point so that we're scaling it like that. Extrude it up a little bit, and then once you have that, let's change to edge select. That way, yeah, if to change to different selection modes, you can hit Control Tab and let's select edge. That way now we can extrude this one just like that, and we're going to do this one by one, varying their length a little bit so that they're not all exactly the same. Extruding down, and you get the point. Okay, there you go. So now we're going to select all of these ones that we extruded down, and I don't think they're down far enough, are they? No, let's just drag them down a bit more. And we're also going to change to individual origins and scale them down like so. That's what you got. I'm also going to select them, and we're going to, once we've got them all selected, this guy's special. There we go. We're going to flip their normals, because right now they're a little bit, the normals are orientated the wrong way, so hit Control N and that'll flip them. There. So I'm going to select the top edge now, or just these two, put the cursor in the middle, and we can add it in a sphere. Now the sphere is going to be 8 by 4, just like that. We can scale it up to be about here. And now just drop that in just like so. If we hit smooth shading, that is the basic shape of our dandelion. I'm also going to scale this in on the Z, and it's way too tall at this point, so let's drag this down about there. There you go. So that is the main shape of the dandelion. Let's add in two materials. The materials are already made for us. Oops, not particles. First material is going to be the clover. Second material is going to be the ground. But we're going to hit 2, and we're just going to make it a bit lighter and desaturate it a little bit, kind of like that. And I'm going to select that for our display color too. And if we go into edit mode and just select the ball, we can assign that material to that. There you go. So there is our dandelion. Next thing is modeling just the seed, little seed pod thing. So add in a cylinder, change it to 5 in vertices, move up on the x-axis like so. And we're going to start by adding a loop in here and dragging this up and adding a loop in there. And if we select both of them, we can scale them out like that, and just add this guy and scale them down like that. And that's the seed. Scale that like that. There we go. Now I'm going to extrude it up, pretty far up, about there. And hit Shift S, cursor to selected, and add in another cylinder. And this one's going to be scaled on the Z. Let's say scale Z5 or scale Z8. There we go. Now scale Shift Z like that and kind of scale him down. And I'm going to add in 3 loops in there. I'm also going to drag him up like so. So if I now take this loop, move him out, and then all 3 of them and move them out, we have that. And actually I'm just going to drag that in a little bit. Cool. Now if I select this entire one piece and rotate around the cursor, I can just push him down like this. And on top view, let's just Shift D, rotate it a little bit like that. And now if we hit Shift R, we can repeat that last action. And there you go. Now that's one of our seed pods, and we're only going to have one that's modeled. Right, so materials, smooth shade it, add in the seed material that we just made for the pod, and then we're going to add in, actually we can name this seed, and then we can add a new one and name it strand. And this strand material is super simple. It's just the diffuse mixed with a glossy, as always. The glossy is 0.1 and the factor is 0.1. The glossy type is Beckman, and just connect those up like that. There you go. Final piece for this material is shader, add shader, and shader translucent. We'll drag that into there and just make this a little bit darker. Now, this one's a little bit different. We also want to have in a transparent, so add in a mixed shader and a shader transparent. And I'm going to set this to 0.4, so it's not too transparent. Awesome. So now I just want to select everything but the seed pod. So I'm just going to select the seed pod and hit Control I, and then assign the strand to that one. Cool. Now you can see we've got our strand here, and we're going to assign that to our dandelion in a second here once we scale the dandelion up to, or scale the dandelion to our scene. And the reason we're going to scale the dandelion first is because when you scale an object that has particles, the particle system gets messed up. So I'm just going to add some variation to this guy, and we can add him into our scene. So right now he's obviously too big, and we're going to scale him down, way down there. Also make sure he's at the surface, like that. We can scale him down, and move him close to the camera. Move him up on the surface again, and scale him way down there. to about here, and I'm going to move him even closer to the camera. Oops. And I'm going to rotate him now and scale him up a little bit. So I'm going to rotate him on the X a little bit like that. And there's the dandelion. We just want to add in a particle system now. And this particle system is going to be the seed that we made. And I'm actually going to select that seed. And I'm going to name it seed. Cool. Select, whoa, that's insane. Select the dandelion. Now come on. Why won't it select the dandelion? Blender. Okay, we're going to add in a vertex group, and this vertex group is going to be where the seeds are. So type in seed, and if we go into edit mode, we can choose what faces we want the seeds to be on. Now, I'm going to add in a loop, so it's just like that. That way I can select these guys now and assign them. And now with our new particle system under vertex group, we can select seed. And so they're only coming out of the seed. We also want to check advanced and random. And we also want to go under render, select object, and select seed. Now, you can see, boom, it's going in a little bit insane. So step 1 is select that seed. I want to select that seed, rotate around its origin in edit mode, rotate X 90 negative, as we've been doing with every other particle system or every other object that has a particle system with objects in it. So obviously our seeds are too big, so we're going to change the overall size. If I go into physics here, change the size to 0.001, then I'll make them a little bit smaller. We're also going to change the random size to 0.3, but we also want to change the velocity normal to, let's say, 0.3 for starters. 0.3 still a little bit too much there. Let's go with a 0.1. Okay, 0.2 is going to be the magic number. Okay, no, it's not. 0.17. There. Getting a little bit tedious. Okay. It seems we have a little bit of a problem and our particles aren't working as I would enjoy them to. So if I apply the scale, will that help? It will not help. I can undo that. Yeah, they're not really being placed properly. So if I change this to jittered, will that do anything? Jittered, random, jittered. Okay, leave that at random. Vertices, nope. Faces, nope. Volume, not at all. So, seed, will that help? It's not helping. I haven't run into this problem yet, and I've practiced this multiple times. So let's just take a look at the other particle system. Okay, this might be the dealio. First thing is make sure that we have rotation checked and it's using normal. Okay, that didn't make a difference. We also want only 200 of these guys, and right now it's looking pretty nasty, isn't it? So let's just deselect this guy, and I'm going to remove the particle system from the dandelion and just use the particle system on just the bud of the dandelion. Whoa, apparently I'm moving the plane. Okay, sorry, I'm going to have to do some problem solving here, figure out why things aren't going properly. Okay, so let's zoom in right in here, and we're going to start by going down to our rendered here. Velocity here. Going down into our render tab, checking everything here, making sure everything's fine, selecting our bud here and applying the rotation. Let's go in here. I quite honestly haven't run into this problem yet. Let me take a look. Yeah, I'm not sure what's happening here. So let's just select this entire thing. And let's subdivide it smooth. Oh, that's not good. Median point. Subdivide smooth. And it's kind of bugging out, isn't it? Okay. It doesn't want to behave today. I'm going to assign everything on here. And make sure that we're using that vertex group again. Kind of like that. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to apply the rotation and then change the random size down to 0. Let's just play with that. So what I did just there, because I skipped ahead, the size, all I did is apply rotation and scale. And the reason it was doing that is because we scaled it before we applied the particle system. And so we just want to apply the scale before we add in that particle system. So we're fine now. We're going to now just change the random size to be 0.3, or sorry, 0.6. Let's say 0.6, there we go. I'm also going to change the normal down to 0.15. And let's take a look at that with the rest of the scene. That was stressful for me. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to have a little bit more than just 200 on there. Let's bump it up to 300. And also change the size, 0.14. And change the random size to 0.7. Or sorry, 0.5. So I'm just going to render out just that part there. See how it looks. Alright, so there you go. That's kind of the bud there. So I think it looks good. And we're ready to do the final render and do some compositing and that kind of stuff. So for our final render, I want to have some depth of field going on in here. So I'm going to select this bud that we have the particle system on. Hit Control Alt Shift C and select Origin to Geometry. And now if we select our camera, and in the camera tab under focus, we can actually select this this object here. So let's select that again. It's named Cylinder 04. So if you select that under focus, Cylinder 04, and enable limits, you can actually see it's even with where this is. So we're going to be focusing on this area. So if we change this to f-stop now, I'm going to go into rendered mode, just rendering inside of the border so that we don't have to render what's outside this stuff. You can see in the background it's super blurry, and this is too much blur. So let's use 7, I think would be good. Maybe even less, so 8. The higher you go, the less depth of field you use. So I'm actually going to go for 10. It's so much depth of field right now that it's blurry. Okay, and that works for me. So I'm going to now do a final full render of this, and then we'll composite the scene, and we'll save it out, and we'll have a final render. Okay, so I just canceled the render for kind of a lame reason. It's this dandelion. I'm just realizing it's too bright. It's super like solid white. So I'm actually just gonna select this dandelion and edit the strand material to, first of all, make the diffuse darker. So it's just gonna be a gray. Translucent is gonna be darker too, and that's gonna take care of that, because perfectly white going through a add shader makes it like extremely white. So just keep that in mind. So let's start this over again here. Take a look here. And before we do a full render, I just want to preview it just to make sure it's not too white as it was before, because it was a little bit too over the top. And now it's not white enough. Okay, that's fine. We can play around with it here. Alright, so let's open that up. Okay, so we can adjust this live here so I can see what I'm doing. I'm going to push this up until I'm happy with the amount of white that's coming through. Okay, so I think about there is going to be nice. And then for the, yeah, that'll be good. Okay, for a final render, once again, before we composite it. Also, I'm rendering at 400 samples and just half of 1080p, because I don't have to worry about this one being high resolution, because it's just on YouTube. I won't be saving this one out as I already have one. Okay, well, I'll see you when this is done rendering. Alright, so it's finally done rendering here. It took about 6.5 minutes, which isn't that bad considering there's a lot of particles in this scene. Now, if there was a couple things I would change about the scene, it'd be 1, I'd probably increase the brightness of the sun, and 2, increase the amount of these guys on here. But I'm not going to do that right now because I'm too lazy to render it again. But we're going to go and do the compositing. So I'm just going to get rid of this here, and I'm just going to open up, oops, not that guy, the render result, this guy. And now if I check use nodes and backdrop, if we can use our nodes here to edit how the image looks, and we can hit Control Shift and click on here, and that will, oops, come on, move, there we go. That'll add in this viewer in the back. Okay, now first thing is I want all the changes I make to be applied to both of these, the compositor and the viewer. So I'm going to hold Shift and drag down like that, and now you can see it's combined those into here. So anything I add in between, like this, will be applied to both. Okay, cool. So now I'm going to add in a, let's see, we want to use color, not hue saturation, color balance, and we can adjust this stuff. So I made this red, you can see what that does. If I make this like blue, you can see what that does. These all do different things. So I'm just going to make the gain a little bit of kind of a bluish, just very light blue. Gamma is going to be a little bit of a yellow, and lift is going to be almost completely white, but actually a touch of blue, just like that. So it's not too extreme. However, without it, it's kind of like that. With it, it's like that. So it just makes it a little bit warmer and inviting. Now we want the vignette, which is the darkening around the corners, as we always want that. So we're going to add in a filter, or sorry, not filter, distort, lens distortion. I'm going to set the distortion to 1, and then add in a filter blur, drag the image into there. Now, if we add in a color mix and just look at that first off, you can see that's what we get. I'm going to change the blur to be fast Gaussian relative on the X, and change these values to 20 by 20. And now you can see that's what we've got. So if we change this to multiply now, you can see we've got that darkening around the corners. I'm actually just going to change this to 10 by 10, so that gives it a little bit more. And I'm going to change this to be 0.7. And it's a little bit too, I'm going to put it back to 20 by 20. So 0.7, you can see 0.1, that's what it's like without it, and 0.7, that's what it's like with it. And I think that looks perfect. Alright, so here you go, guys. This is the final result from the tutorial here. And so I hope you now have learned how to make realistic grass for Blender cycles, and you can now apply this into any of your scene you want. and it should look realistic. So if you guys enjoyed this, make sure to leave a like, because it not only supports me, but it supports the Blender community. If I see that you guys are enjoying the tutorials, I'll make more and you guys can benefit from it. So that's just about it from me. I hope you guys enjoyed the tutorial, and if you did, leave a like. If you didn't, leave a dislike. That's pretty much all. Good luck, have fun, bye bye.